Hello, this is Mrs. Mackey. Today we're going to talk about adding integers. Our past videos have started with all of this information on the first slide. But you should be getting into the routine and habits of how your iBook should be looking. So our slides show we'll be starting like this soon. The title, notice it is missing the number, and that you have to get from our open class website. And it has the essential question. So most of my videos will be starting like this. Do your notes look like this? Make sure you pause it. I'm not going to be reminding you every time to pause the video if your notes aren't set up right. I'll still do it, though, a couple more times. We have a review vocabulary word, additive inverse. There are two numbers that add to 0. We looked at that before when we were talking about opposites. You do not need to copy this into your notes again. However, you might just put the word up there, so you remember we're going to be talking about it for when you update your index. New word today, though, is absolute value. Absolute value is the distance of a number from 0. There are some special symbols around absolute value, but we're not going to look at those today. We're just going to talk about the distance of a number from 0. So if I am dealing with the number 5, 5 is 5 spaces from 0. Well, -5 is also 5 spaces from 0. So both 5 and -5 have an absolute value of 5. They are both 5 units from 0. Make sure this is in your notes. You probably already know the addition rules, although you might need to review them because it may have been a while since you've used them. But one major part of the 7th grade standard is that you're able to model them. So you have to know how to do this 3 different ways. Our first way is using counters. Now I've got my counters up here again. We've got, remember, yellow is positive and red is negative. And our example problem is 3 plus -2. So I have 3 positive counters and 2 negative counters. We discussed before that 1 negative and 1 positive equals something called a 0 pair. It equals 0. So I'll just write this up here, 0 pair. And my 0 pairs kind of disappear. It's gone. It equals 0. Well, I have another 0 pair here, right there. And I'm left with positive 1. So my answer to 3 plus -2 is positive 1. Okay. That's one way I have to show it. I also have to be able to show it on a number line. When we do this on a number line, we always start at 0, and it says move 3 in the positive direction. So I'm going to move 3 in the positive direction, and then go 2 places in the negative direction. And I'm back here at positive 1 also. Pause if you don't have this already in your video. Sorry, in your notes. All right, I want you to do this next one. Show positive 5 and -4 using counters and a number line. When you do your counters, you don't have to color them yellow and red. You can just use the plus and minuses. Pause the video and then come back to check your work. Okay, so let's check our work. I have my 5 positive counters and my 4 negative counters. And when I get rid of my 0 pairs, I'm left with positive 1. And over here on my number line, I went over positive 5 and back 4, which leaves me with positive 1. Either way, 5 plus -4 equals positive 1. Make sure you have the problem and you've boxed your final answer. You can also use a rule to add. And each teacher says the rule a little differently. But so if you already know it, that's a good thing. This is how you'll hear me say it. There's two steps when we're adding integers together. And the first step that I need to do is ask myself, are my numbers the same signs or are they different? In example B, my numbers are both negative, so I have the same sign. When I have the same sign, I'm going to add them together. So I have 18 and 16. 18 plus 16 is 34. But I'm not finished with my answer yet. Then I have to keep the same sign. So since both of my add-ins, the numbers I was adding together, were negative, my answer is also negative. Example C, I have different signs. I have negative 23 and positive 8. And in my head, I have to think about this as a subtraction problem. Now, here's where it gets sticky. We're not really subtracting the numbers themselves, we're subtracting the absolute values, the distances from 0, because we're kind of dealing with positive numbers. So we're going to subtract them and keep the sign of the number that's furthest from 0. So in this problem, example C, I have 23 minus 8 is how I have to think about this in my head, and that's 15. Then I have to ask myself, which number is furthest away from 0? Negative 23 or 8? Well, it's negative 23. That means my answer is 23. I'm sorry. It means my answer is negative 15. A lot of people kind of ignore some of the vocabulary, and they just say subtract and keep the largest number. But the largest number is always positive. So we're going to say to keep the sign with the largest absolute value. We're going to work on that vocabulary this year. I'm not, if you just think about it as the largest number in your head, that's fine. But when we talk about it, I need you to use the correct vocabulary. Please get these problems in your notes. Be sure you write these steps down. Okay, here are 3 problems for you to do. When you look at the example, make sure that you ask yourselves, same signs or different? If they're the same, you add. If they're different, subtract. Do these problems, pause the video, come back to check your work. Okay, here are the answers. If you did not get these answers, please be sure that you ask questions in class tomorrow. You've written questions in your iBook for us to go over in class. Here's the key concepts. There are 3 ways you can use to add integers. The main thing for the rule is if they have the same signs, you add. If you have different signs, you subtract. Remember, this should be in your notes. Pause the video, make sure this information's there. If it's not, add anything you need to add. Write your 2 questions, either questions that you personally have or questions that a teacher might ask you. And finally, answer our essential question. How do you know if your final answer is going to be negative or positive when you're adding 2 integers? TTFN.